Thousands of renters opposed to a proposed bill they say could strip tenants' rights will rally at Queen's Park tomorrow. It'll cap off a busy week at Queen's Park that saw the Ford government fast-track its new education bill into law, but not before the leader of the opposition was thrown out of the chambers for calling the government corrupt. NDP Leader Marit Stiles joins me live now. It's a pleasure to welcome you back to studio.
Well,
thanks so much for making the time.
Great to be here.
I do want to start on the passage of Bill 33 because the Education Minister Paul Calandra joined us yesterday to discuss his new powers, and so I'd like to get your take on it. He has repeatedly cited the Near North School Board in Parry Sound as justification for his powers after a review found dysfunction in that school board. Do you not think that it is the duty of the minister to be able to step in more quickly in a situation like that?
Well, look, I mean, right now, the minister has already stepped in on take over a bunch of school boards, including the TDSB, which was nothing to do with dysfunction. He said it was because of financial issues, but in fact, they're not really in any kind of dire financial straits. I think the minister has the powers that he needs right now. This bill, and the reason that we've opposed this bill is because nothing in this bill does anything to support our kids. It doesn't support children who are struggling. It doesn't provide additional supports to them in the classroom. And what it does, I think, and I fear, is it allows the Minister of Education to impose his views of things in the classroom. And that's not what I'm hearing from Ontarians that they want for our kids and for our education workers.
The minister told me yesterday he'll still have to clear an independent investigation and get recommendations before he's able to take over a school board, though.
Well, he's also said that he might just do away with all of the trustees. And when I will say this, it's been very interesting to hear from so many people over the summer who were reaching out to us and saying that they don't want to see those positions gone. They want to have someone who is locally elected, who they can go to as a parent to advocate for their children or find out answers to questions. And that is a lot of the work that trustees do. So the good thing about a trustee, of course, is they are locally elected. So if you don't like the work your trustee is doing, you can vote them out.
I do want to ask you about Bill 60, the housing bill that's supposed to be voted on, I believe, next week. The housing minister has said that the idea of the legislation is to cut back on delays at the landlord-tenant board and also improve accountability for those who repeatedly abuse the system. Why is that a bad thing?
Well, first of all, nothing that's in that bill is going to actually make the landlord-tenant board move faster. In fact, our fear is that what it's going to do is make it just a lot easier for big corporate landlords to be able to evict tenants, to be able to drive up rent. And you're seeing the outrage coming from renters. Renters all over Ontario are very, very deeply concerned because already we have, and look, the landlord-tenant board is going too slow, and it's not working for most people. It's not working for landlords. It's not working for tenants. So we need to fix that. But the answer to that is actually not to just make it easier for landlords, particularly big corporate landlords, to evict tenants.
When you say it's going to drive up rents, can you explain how? Because the government backtracked on that proposal to end indefinite leases and rent control. So how now, without that provision, does it actually drive up rents?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, what it doesn't do is it doesn't address the rising cost, the rising rent in Ontario. And what we've seen is that, and what our fear is that if it's easier for a landlord, a big corporate landlord, to evict tenants, then they can then go and jack up the rent, right? Because there's no rent control for the most part in Ontario. So once a tenant is evicted, landlord can jack up the rent as high as they want, and then the next tenant is going to have even higher rent. So rents will keep going up. So the fear here is that this is actually going to mean that rents continue to get higher. We're just starting to see rent go down a little bit in some places, and that's a good thing because people are really struggling right now, and we are losing jobs left, right, and center across this province. So I'm hopeful that the minister heard that and won't take those actions that he talked about, but the provisions that are in the legislation right now will still allow for corporate landlords to jack up the rent even higher and evict people more easily.
According to the latest data from the CMHC, about 75,000 units here in Ontario are secondary rental units, so like basement apartments and individual condos. I wonder how you think then it would be, like, what would be a more balanced approach to rectifying it without it being on the backs of small landlords?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, like I said, landlord and tenant board needs to be fixed, right? The government has made a mess of it, if we're honest, right? They've put it all online. They've appointed adjudicators that are very biased. It's not helping anybody. And we do have a huge backlog, and that's really bad for small landlords too. So we need to fix that, and we've been advocating for that for a long time. That this legislation does not fix that problem. In fact, it might even make it worse. That's our fear. That's what we're hearing from advocates. And again, I think we have to think about, like, how are people going to survive? You know, the number one issue on so many people's minds out there is how do we stop this growing homelessness problem? Well, you know what? We got to save people's homes in the first place. And what we are seeing again is big corporate landlords that are rent-evicting tenants. They're jacking up the rent above the guidelines over and over again. And tenants have fewer and fewer tools to be able to stand up to that. They're very vulnerable, and we need to make sure those people don't lose their homes too.
I do want to get your reflections on the week that was at Queen's Park, because you said that you stand by the comments that got you kicked out of the chamber of the legislature earlier this week. You called the government corrupt over its handling of the Skills and Development Fund. I wonder if you are willing to get ejected again to make your point.
Well, I don't take it lightly. You know, it's not something I want to do every day, because when I'm ejected from the legislature, I can't go back in and vote, for example.
So but if your vote, for instance, doesn't necessarily matter because the government has a majority.
Well, I think, look, it's a real privilege to be in the position I'm in and to have the role I have. As the leader of the opposition, I get every day to ask the Premier questions that I think people out there want answered. And I get to hold them to account. And the issues we've been dealing with is a situation where a program that gives out billions of dollars in grants is connected to a Minister of Labor who has been receiving, and the Auditor General was very clear about this, favors from companies that have benefited. So I think that is corruption. I'm going to call it what it is, and I'm not allowed to say that word in the chamber. So I did feel like I'd reached my limit, and I'll say this as well. You know, I've been asking the Premier these questions for 5 weeks. He almost never shows up to answer the questions, and even when he's there, he doesn't answer them. And I think, like a lot of Ontarians, I'm pretty fed up with it. And I think that Ontarians, and I've certainly heard from many, many people over the last few days who want me to stand up for them. I mean, that is my role. It's to ask the questions that people want answers to. So I'm going to keep doing it. I will certainly not want to be ejected every day, but I do think it's time to call the government and this Premier what he is. And I do believe that right now that program and some of the other grant programs are revealing corruption in the government.
Okay, NDP Leader Marit Stiles, I have to leave it there. I'm out of time. I appreciate you taking the time for the conversation this morning.
Thank you.